of Speaks, Building a New Legacy, here in the DaCrew Podcast 5. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to highlight a variety of activities and programs that are taking place around the globe. I'm really honored and privileged to be able to share. I could do the long biography of my guests, but I think for the purposes of what we're going to be speaking about as truth is power, we'd like to just put out to the listening and viewing audience that this day of August 17th is a very significant day in the history of African people, revolutionary people, Pan Africanist persons, African fundamentalist persons, and the wider global community as it marks the anniversary of the birth of the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey. And we just would like persons to take a moment of reflection, a moment of silence, a moment of pause, and a moment of grace, just in honor of this great, great African leader. And we can speak throughout tonight's broadcast and provide some tidbits, perhaps some quotations that come from the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association African Communities League in 1914, and the host, the lead, alongside other members of the UNIA-ACL, of the significant convention hosted in Madison Square Garden in New York City in 1920 during the month of August, through which several different significant observances, commemorations, even the decree of Negro people of the world came through those conventions. So it wasn't just a conference, it wasn't just a seminar, and definitely not just a workshop, but it was an actual strategic plan for a government for the Universal Negro Improvement Association, African Communities League, which by definition, every African doing work in our communities that are uplifting our communities are part of the African Communities League, just as a point of information. So, with that being said, I would like to introduce and welcome. She's not a stranger to media, and I definitely not a stranger to bringing truth to power. And that is none other than my beloved sister, queen, and scholar, Dr. Rhoda Arundel. How are you doing, Sister Queen?
Good evening to you, to your listeners, viewers around the world. I'm doing great. Thank you so much. As you know, I've entered this new phase and I'm among some of the greatest in terms of grandmotherhood. So it's like having a new child all over again. But
Exactly.
yeah, that's what's on my mind a lot these days. But yeah,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
many congratulations, many blessed congratulations. We're grateful that the journey went well for your
Mhm.
daughter and
Yes,
her
ma'am.
partner, her beloved husband. And we're very
Mhm.
grateful to know that in the midst of all of the shroud of secrecy, because we want to protect that nest, that you have joined our sacred queen grandmother circle. That's
Yes, ma'am.
that we welcome you and with open arms and a lot of support and a lot of energy because we know it requires a significant amount of energy to hold that sacred space. And
Yeah.
I'm always excited when we get an opportunity to speak because you have done a significant amount of work through your work coming out of Curacao, being raised in St. Martin, and highlighting that in St. Martin, similarly to the Virgin Islands where I reside, that these are Caribbean territories that remain colonized. In
Hmm.
the case of St. Martin by the Kingdom of the Netherlands and the Republic of France, and in the case of the Virgin Islands by the government of the United States of America. But I
Hmm.
also like persons to just be very clear that you bring to this conversation, which is a very significant one, as we're honoring, yes, the work of the illustrious leader, Marcus Messiah Garvey, but also those women and men that surrounded him and supported him to have it where the UNIA still exists in 2025. So I just would like persons to just know, that in addition to you having credentials and degrees in linguistics, and we can, we want to put out that shout out, Syracuse,
Yeah, Syracuse.
and a pre-law diploma from the University of the Netherlands Antilles in Curacao, in addition to a master's in administration through the University of the Virgin Islands. Boop, UBI.
Uh-huh.
That's right. And and then securing your PhD in English linguistics with a very specialized area in your discipline of Caribbean languages from the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras. I think it's important for persons to know that you also have served as an elected minister, the first minister of
Mhm.
education, culture, sports, and youth affairs in St. Martin. I think it's really important to know that, and that was through the
Mhm.
UPDP coalition.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'll let you speak more to that as we speak. But you have also, you've published work, your groundbreaking work on language, culture, and identity in St. Martin, published in 2014, speaks volumes and is a essential read for persons that are understanding, desire to understand, I should say, language, linguistics, communication, identity, ethics, as well as culture. I also think that we're hearing that we're waiting for this next manuscript around how to get a world class education from St. Martin. I had to tip my crown for a second. I said, "Wait, I wait in, wait there." So, just putting it out there because with
Oh man.
being in all of these different places and currently being our immediate past president of the Caribbean Studies Association and having a very successful CSA conference in June of this year that brought together hundreds of scholars from around the world around significant themes linked to reparatory justice, reparation, etc., self
Mhm.
determination, and more. And being able to blend that with the efforts and again, another significant convening of the St. Martin Book Fair, and having that connection with the House and the Hesse Publishers and One SXM and all of the other phenomenal creatives and artivists out of St. Martin and the wider Caribbean and the world, convening in St. Martin. In the midst of all of this, you also teach and serve as a professor at Howard University. So I just wanted people to know that just having you make time to join us here this evening, especially at the beginning of the semester, as we both shared that issue, we're very grateful. Very
First,
grateful.
oh, that was awesome. First of all, let me just thank you again and your team for this opportunity. It is when you started listing these things that I'm reminded, because you, like I, we're so busy. Like I always ask, like, where do you get the time, right? And we're so busy doing the work that we do. It's when I heard you mention, I was like, oh my goodness, I forgot about that. Because you're busy working. So I want to thank you for the breather, for the opportunity to do this, but also to reflect. And then as you were speaking, I was thinking, how do we tie this back into what we're doing this evening? We're talking about honoring the legacy of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, but also knowing that that has been the thing that has, influenced our work and our drive to do the things that we're doing. When you think back of all the work that we're doing, it comes back to the basic principles that were coming out of the teachings of Marcus Garvey. So I'm glad, for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. Okay, was that me? Was that frozen? Can you ladies hear me? Oh, can you hear me still? It says offline. Who's offline? I'm not offline. Can you hear me? Oh, I'm not sure what happened there. It could be you, it could be me.
So you keep it going. Whenever it happens, it makes
Okay. Yeah, because we also have a little substandard kind of internet connectivity here at times. Okay, I'm not sure if it's here, but it
Parts
can.
involved in the Virgin Islands. So please move it forward from that conversation of honoring Garvey.
Okay, what was that? Okay, it's saying offline, but yeah, I'm not sure if you can hear me, and I want to say thanks. And it's funny, or maybe not, how sometimes these things happen. But you know what I am going to do? I am going to try something else. Yeah. Can you still hear me?
Yes, you keep going because you're
Already, because I wasn't too sure. Because I was thinking maybe I should go to my computer where I know my data is a little more stable based on my AT&T account. But if this works, then I'll just stay here. And yeah, yes, I see. No, I'm here. Can you hear me? Is Dr. Chen there? Okay. I'm gonna try also to see what happens from my cell phone because I think my cell phone allows
forward
me
to
to
being able
stay
to continue the
consistent.
conversation.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing you, Queen, or not? Oh, yeah, I'm getting feedback because I think I'll switch devices or not. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Discussions that are happening in the globe. So whether it's the Basani International, the Black Star African Network. Yes, I hear you well. I was just giving. Okay, keep going. Okay. Okay. I can hear you and we can see your eyes. Okay, so the challenge. Okay, she's switching it around. We can hear you now. Okay. Yes, I'm here because we can hear you and I can see that you came into the platform, but I. Okay. Okay. Are you able to see? She has it opened. Okay. Okay. No worries. Yeah. Well, no, I am making sure that she can have you inside of the platform. I don't have the. I don't have the ability to do. Okay. Whoa. And now she's gone. Okay. I'm gonna because I'm not sure what my concern. Let me hear you speak, please. Yeah. The challenge that I have is from where I am. I can hear you, but you're not in the studio, so I have to
Oh, thing that okay.
okay, no
I'm gonna
problem.
close this.
We'll try that. No worries. No worries. Well,
Okay.
let's see.
So
Well,
now I'm
let's.
back from
Right,
the
so you
phone.
go
I'm
ahead
back.
and speak. You go ahead and speak, Quinn. You go ahead, please. You go ahead and speak, Quinn.
No, I'm not hearing you, Doc.
Uh
Oh
oh.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I got you. Hey, I got it. I'm back.
Right. So let's move to the next part because so viewers and listeners, we're very appreciative that you are so patient with some of our technological issues here. Just think of it as the whirlwind.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that's taking place, and this is also happening on the eve of the forthcoming Carapesta X5 XV 15
Right.
being hosted in Barbados, and there's going to be a host of energy. It'll be a serious whirlwind, a serious kimbonga energy in terms of dance, theater, film, visual arts, performative arts, literature, culinary arts. I'm sure I'm missing out quite a few things because there's going to be some big conversations. I'm going to keep saying that big conversations and a lot of observances of different activities and educational opportunities that actually blend together for the wider Caribbean spaces. I think it's important for persons to just be aware. If you don't know what Carafesta is, we're encouraging you to go to carafesta.net and just again, CARIFESTA.net, and you'll be able to get a good breather of exactly what Carafesta is, the focus for this international, Caribbean grounded, Caribbean celebratory space. As I said, visual arts, music, theater, dance, film, fashion. Make sure I don't forget that part. Fashion. I'm going to say that again. You're going to see some serious
Mhm.
fashion, the grand market, the literary arts. There's a significant, a big conversations, symposia, and a host of different concerts, a youth village, and so much more. And I just want to put the extra plug. I see already
Mhm.
St. Martin bringing a delegation.
Yes.
So definitely congratulations to the people of St. Martin. We're looking forward to all of the creatives and all of the scholars, including yourself, that are going to be participatory in Carifesta 15, August 22nd to 31st, in one of the Caribbean's newest republics,
Yes.
Barbados. So we're excited about. So that's why I just wanted, So please speak freely in regards to some of the things that are happening in Saint Martin. How does that relate to African fundamentalism? And I always start with, what would Marcus Garvey do?
That's very interesting. So I've been told about the delegation that St. Martin is sending. I was privy to some of the information because again, everybody, and I think it's like every other Caribbean territory, we talk about budgetary constraints, et cetera, et cetera. So when I saw the delegation that was being put together with discussions with having talked to the head of the culture department, my understanding is that we try to represent as broad a spectrum as possible to make sure that St. Martin is fully represented on the stage in terms of its artistic repertoire, because we have quite a number of talented people here from across all genres. And when I saw the delegation that is on its way there, I said, okay, it's a younger delegation, but the intention seems to have been to cover the spectrum, right? So for
Hmm.
me, that is going to be for us, the work that we do, that is going to be so important. Number one, they're younger, and number two, they're able to exchange because they will also be sharing what they can do, but they will be learning a lot from our Caribbean brothers and sisters. And as often happens in these colonial spaces, like in the Virgin Islands, like in Puerto Rico, and some of these places, when we engage with the wider Caribbean, we realize that there's some things that are very different, and there are other things that are very much alike. And I'm looking forward to see what that translates into how we see ourselves as Saint Martiners. So that's one, right? Yes, we're artists, etc., but we're colonized artists in Saint Martin. Our artists are in a colonial space, still colonized, and when we're looking at a platform like Carifesta and we're talking about the full potential of the Caribbean, what does it mean when you live in a colonized space, and how does that influence the conversations that you're having with your Caribbean peers? So that's one. And then on the side of the discussions, the heavier stuff, where there will be discussions about decolonization, etc., One SXM or One St. Martin, our organization, has been invited, and we will be participating in those conversations as well. You know, how do we in St. Martin today move forward as we are seeking a decolonized space? We want to have our Caribbean fully decolonized. And what is our role? Because we keep getting invited and we're part of these discussions. But the question is, what are we going to actively do to make it happen, right?
Correct.
And how do we, not as individuals, not just NGOs and organizations, but how do we influence the government, or sort of urge or nudge the government to also move towards that goal, right, of a decolonized space? So that's a lot of what I'm looking forward to in the discussion with Carrie Festa.
Beautiful. And this is something that allows for, and again, I encourage persons that are not familiar to go to carafesta.net, and that way you can see a range of not only what's happening, so it's not just festivities and party and so forth, even though that's a portion of it, but it's showing authentically
Yeah.
how culture serves as culture and heritage and literacy, and all of the creatives actually becomes this, and I quote, the Caribbean Festival of Arts, Carafesta, has assumed a preeminent place among the elements that define and give expression to the uniqueness of our Caribbean reality. Like other significant institutions such as Cricket, CXC, and CARICOM, Caribbean Community, that symbolize a Caribbean commonality, the festival reinforces our unity amidst our splendid diversity. Carafesta, which has been hailed as the inspirational exchange of creative flows, has its foundations in the staging of the first Caribbean Festival of Arts in San Juan, Puerto Rico in 1952. This event sparked enthusiasm across the region for celebrating the excellence of Caribbean artistry. The creation of the Indies Federation was marked by the staging of a festival in Trinidad through the auspices of the extramural department of the then University College of the West Indies, which is now the University of the West Indies. This celebratory spirit infused the artistic community of the region, and it was at a regional gathering of artists in Guyana in 1970 that the idea of a grand Caribbean festival was conceived. Unquote. And I think it's important to just know some of that history. So when you go to that carafesta.net website, please look at the about, just to get a snippet. That's like a photos picture of what were some of the foundational pieces, and it gives more information of what transpired, in the 60s leading up to 1970, and then having this first Festival of Arts in Guyana in 1972, and the rest is history. So keeping
Yeah.
in mind that what's happening is linked to these types of things, and it has expanded so persons know that there are these big conversations on issues that affect this region. And for the persons in the back of the room, anything that happens in the Caribbean impacts not only the North and South Americas, everybody in between, but the entire globe. I just need that to sink in, and you need to simmer on that thought.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
most of us are, I hope where persons are hearing and understanding, and I say not just understand, but from the inside, get that comprehension that
Yeah.
these spaces that we're referencing, and specifically the spaces in which Dr. Rhoda Arundel and myself reside, they're still colonies in 2025. Even though entities like the United Nations, since the 1950s, have created and had general assemblies with very specific resolutions for there to be no more colonial territorial spaces on the entire earth. That's all 193 plus countries.
Mm-hmm.
But there still are.
Yep. Yep. And I think we are all duty bound to try to change that, right? Like you said, I'm with you on, the party, and we love a good party as Caribbean people. We love good literature and poetry and performances, etc. But we really have to talk about this part of our celebration as a people, as Caribbean people, but also how it affects and how it's connected to what's happening in the world. Connected, you can't disconnect us from what's happening in the rest of the world.
Correct. And I really would be remiss if I didn't identify that, we have had, yourself and I, through 1SXM and through the Caribbean Pan African Network and other formations in the region, while our respective spaces, territorial spaces, do not have sovereignty and independence yet. It's through these civil society networks, these non governmental networks, and our partnerships with governmental networks that we are able to share our narratives
Yeah.
and our quest for decolonization, our quest for self determination, our self for a different type of, it may not be independence immediately for some, but there needs to be some type of a, what people like to call free association, or some type of social governance that
Mm-hmm.
provides for that quest towards independence in regard to the lives,
Mm-hmm.
the livelihood, the
Mm-hmm.
land. I'm going to keep coming back to that one, the land, and the vision and the desires and needs of the people in St. Martin, in Puerto Rico, in the Virgin Islands, and we can go on, Guam, Samoa, and the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to know that it's not only the U.S. and France or the
And
Netherlands that we're speaking of. There's things that are still held in territorial colonial spaces from Spain, you know,
mm-hmm.
Portugal. I mean, this is not, the UK, the British, and we'll notice that these are the same entities that have reaped wealth beyond measure
Mm-hmm.
from even the enslavement experience process, more accurately, the human trafficking of Africans from the continent, all 12 million square miles, into these spaces on the other side of the Atlantic, as well as moving these bodies into other parts of the globe. So that's why I always highlight, when we're speaking of Caribbean themes and Caribbean civilization and Caribbean upliftment and artistry and artivism. I like that term, artivism, because most of our artists in these spaces have to be activists at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, and yourself included, because a number of things that were done in the recent CSA conference of 2025, as well as the St. Martin Book Fair, and all of the and the manner in which things were done on the entire Isle of St. Martin. So there was one St. Martin authentically. It wasn't the
Yeah.
north side and the south side. It wasn't the Dutch and the French. It was one St. Martin, that Sualiva vibe. I think that was really what
Mm.
across really powerfully. And I would love for you to share, how do you bring that into places like the Carifestive vibration, as well as how do you bring that into your classroom when you're teaching, or how do you do that? Because I didn't even mention that, but please share. You have a radio broadcast that you do weekly as well. I think
Yep.
it's important for people to know some details about that, how they can contact you as well, so that persons know how to follow up. So this isn't a one and done type piece.
Now, that's a very interesting question because just today I was asked by someone, and this is someone in their 40s, right? Who said, can you help me? This is a younger person who was asked basically like, who are you as St. Martin people? And they were asked this question by someone in the United States, and he said to me, well, I want to ask you this. How do we come to this conversation of the division of the island? And then also, if I were to say to someone that I'm Afro-Caribbean, is it correct? No, I thought that was interesting that a St. Martin person is asking me. And this is because when you live in these colonial spaces, this idea of identity becomes front and center. Who exactly are you, and how do you represent yourself, and how do you identify? So one of the things that we as one SXM or one St. Martin as a group try to stick to, because our association is founded on the principle that St. Martin people are one people, which is something that we didn't have to make up. It was there even before the actual acceptance of the partitioning of the island between the French and the Dutch in 1648, that even with these different administrations that had been in charge or in control of the rock at different times, that the people certainly among themselves remain one, right? And when you think of the African ancestors, they were deemed property, so they weren't even considered humans, and their use, if I may use the word use, but the utilization of their labor didn't, there were no boundaries. So you could pick them up and put them to work in salt pans that were administered by a Dutch colonial state or French colonial state, or when the British were here or when the Spanish were here. So it didn't matter to them, because these were property, but they could be used, and they refer to it as free movement of goods, meaning the African ancestors. So from that point, we begin our work in one SXM, one St. Martin, that in spite of, because what we have seen in the last, and I may dare say in the last 30 years for certain,
Okay.
last 20 years or so, is that people use the word recolonization, but I tend to not say re, because they never left. But what you do see is a stronger effort to
Pause.
bring more of the Dutch and the French presence.
Yeah, but pause on that. You need to
Yes.
you need to wheel and come again with that one. The recolonization. Yeah, reel and come.
Yeah. You can't read something that never ended, right? It's been there. They never stopped the colonization of our islands, right?
You see,
They've
I had to
always
hold
been
on to
here.
my crown. I had to
Yeah.
hold on to
Yeah, because they're using that language, right? They're using that language. Oh, neo-colonialism. It's nothing new about what's happening. It's the same continuous, activity. But what they literally, they had abandoned us, and we were quite grateful. But with that abandonment, and with the focus on Willemstad as the center for the Dutch, and Basse-Terre in Guadeloupe as the center for the French, we in St. Martin were pretty much left on our own, even though they listed us as Netherlands Antilles and French West Indies. The focus was not on the St. Martin people and their development. So what has happened is that the people on their own went about doing their own thing in their administration. Big influence of American tourism and North American tourism as far as Canada, etc. And so the island starts to flourish again, and then you see this big narrative about French and Dutch, and how much Dutch is missing, and more of Dutch this, and more of Dutch in education, and more, because there seems to be a tendency to reclaim the space, even though they've never left, but they're reclaiming it in the name of France and the Netherlands. And that's what we are up against as one SXM. We're trying to remind not just our indigenous people who know this, but our visitors, the newcomers, the ones who are coming with the new Dutch passport and the new French passport, who do not have this history, this connection to the ancestral lineage, right? The people were always one. They're usually coming from places like Suriname, the Netherlands, from the other Caribbean territories where we switched over to English as language of instruction. So they're coming from Jamaica and Guyana. So they're our St. Martiners, but they're the newcomers. And they now tend to affiliate with the Netherlands or France versus St. Martin. But not all of them, but that's the narrative that you're Dutch, you carry a Dutch passport, you live on the Dutch side, and you can't work on the French side. And if you're French, you Guadeloupe is more, endemic rather than. So we're up against that. And so our aim is to remind the St. Martin people and all our visitors that we are first and foremost St. Martin people. We are one people, and that's how we spread the word, right? And so we've had to fight for the correct spelling of our name, for example, um, in using our language, which is the English language. And to what extent is that different from the territory that is occupied by the Dutch? And how what that means. This is an ongoing conversation, but it's starting to catch on, as you mentioned, through our radio programming, our articles, our social media posts, etc. That at least the awareness is out there that the spellings represent different things. That this is when we are making reference to a specific territory versus when we are referring to the entire island and the entire people, but not everyone accepts it. So it's an ongoing struggle, but we are determined, and we are now hoping that with these new conversations, as you saw with this conversation of slavery and slavery past and Dutch funding, etc., that we do not get left out of that because that narrative is intended to erase this what we are talking about, right? In the Dutch kingdom, this is what happened, and this is how it maybe we can talk about it as a Dutch family, but we want to move on. And we are in one St. Martin are saying, hold up, we can talk about these things, but our moving on is not in a shared future with the Kingdom of the Netherlands or with the Republic of France. Our shared future is in the Caribbean. And how do we get to become more integrated in the Caribbean family? So that's the work that we're doing. That's how we're pushing the conversation.
And and thank you so much for giving us that eloquent yet sequential and developmental understanding of how that's what is intended and what is being done, and why some of the disingenuous efforts of the respective sovereigns, whether they're in the Netherlands, the US, the UK, or wherever, France, etc., that there is a very clear ideological frame of reference and a very clear form of implementation and organization to make sure that that reparations platform, that reparations framework, and those reparatory justice initiatives are one and the same, and that persons are really clear on, you can't speak for us and then tell us that it's a neo this or a recolonization that or
Mm,
past this or past that, because if it was in the past, then it would have been healed, it would have been resolved, there would have been equitable distribution of the wealth based on there not being an equitable distribution of the wealth from the time that you were raping and pillaging and committing genocidal terrorism against humanity in the form of our ancestors. And see, we are able to say these things in a very diplomatic, I think that was a nice version of how it could be said versus how it can be like slash and burn. And what is happening, especially with our young people, they're still framing a more clear understanding of how not to just go into a rage space when they hear that really happened to it. They did what?
yeah.
And then that little energy, and we're working our best not to lose that warrior energy, not to lose that warrior spirit, because that's essential to move certain things forward. You don't just that's youth are the spark of the revolution anywhere. It's just so
Mm-hmm.
that we're able to be able to share this information, have proper educational engagement. That's why when we see entities, governments that we will not name, that want to block and remove and reconfigure historical truths or delete them and make it institutionally appropriate for there to be lies told on what were the foundational cornerstones of the development of a respective nation that is quite sovereign and placing its talons and fangs around the globe. That's why you have persons rising up the way that they are in different parts of the world. That's why we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing young people rise up, and it's a powerful type of a conversation. And I see that through the lens of the work that One XM has done within the CARICOM Reparations Commission, along with the work of the Caribbean Pan-African Network, again, as members within the CARICOM Reparations Commission, that there are a number of big conversations that are, again, part of the Caribbean Festival, Carafesta 15 in Barbados, of which representatives, yourself, myself included, have been invited to engage. I think it's important that persons know that these are the types of initiatives that are ongoing. And see, some people like to think that an initiative just started, but
Mm-hmm.
ongoing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these
Yes.
are not just projects, but these are actually institutions that have teeth and have
Yes.
actionable deliverables that are tied to our respective spaces, lands, people, institutions, persons, and much, much more. And what we're beginning to highlight in the format of some of our activities is to be able to place, so it may be, we may say something in a lecture that would come across very harsh and, oh my God, how did that happen? Versus when you hear it in a song, then it comes across
Right.
when somebody says, Queen Mary, woo,
Yeah.
where you going to born? Yeah, Queen Mary, girl, woo, where you going to born? What
Yeah.
no ass,
Yeah.
nothing top. Just past the mat and trash, right? Buzzing jailhouses, where we going to born? When we sing it, and that's just one of the examples. I mean, there's many others, and I know it's going to be a sea
Mm-hmm.
of interchangeable vibrations and expertise from youth all the way to well seasoned
Yeah.
artists that
Right.
are going to be sharing. Again, these conversations are going to happen in chat and language and
Mm-hmm.
talk. They're going to happen through all these other mediums of creative arts. And then there's going to be a lot of fellowship where persons are going to have these even bigger conversations, we pray, on just in the marketplace and just in the villages and just as
Mm-hmm.
people are coming to know one another and to bring a oneness. Well, we speak of this oneness in the Caribbean civilization spaces. So I'm looking forward to that. And that, for me, and you can concur if you agree, is the essence of some of the quest for African unity through the lens of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And of course, it's not the same. The term Negro was used in 1914. I know a lot of people have issues with that. But I always
Yeah.
encourage persons, I said, but to know that there is an entity, and I always put it in that same frame. Even people like Madam C.J. Walker was a financier for the
Right.
UNIA conventions in New York.
Right.
I want people to
Right.
get Ida B. Wells,
Mm-hmm. And
Mary,
so context matters.
so right. And I think, and many others that, come in and out. I mean, there's this recent publication I was going to put my hands on by Dr. Natanya Duncan, who, shared her work at the CSA conference and has been sharing her work, this wonderful, phenomenal publication on efficient womanhood, the women of the UNIA, and by Dr. Natanya Duncan, who is the director of Africana Studies at Queens College in New York. I think it's important for persons
Mm-hmm.
to know that there are publications like that that are also paired with other activities happening in communities, whether it's Saturday, Sankofa Saturday programs, spearheaded by young sisters, well, not so young anymore, like
Yeah.
Dara Manifa Cooper, who is a professional communication specialist, right? Coming out
Mm-hmm.
of the Virgin Islands and doing her work, throughout the region. I think it's important to know that there are a number of organizational entities that are doing this type of work to tell these truths through different lenses and different platforms and different media frameworks so that we can actually stop having a repeat of the mistruths that are customarily shared with our people, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we're dealing with here in the Virgin Islands of the United States, and that's been an issue. Well, it doesn't matter if we say USVI, U.S. Virgin Islands, or if we put Virgin Islands first or last. And I said it does.
It does.
I said legally, it's the Virgin Islands of the United States, according to the
Mm-hmm.
original Organic Act in the
Mm-hmm.
1930s, when they did the transfer and purchase in the 1917, I mean, it was very clear. They didn't call it U.S. anything. They called it the
All
Virgin
right.
Islands of the United States, which would really translate into Virgin Islands us if we chose to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? But there's
Mm-hmm.
persons, for I guess tourist reasons and to just make it more palatable, that are comfortable putting the colonizer first and not thinking that that matters. Very similar to what Santa Claus looks like, right? I'm
or
gonna leave
or
that. We'll leave
or,
that.
or
Say that
what
delicately.
they try here is this thing called Caribbean Netherlands. You
Oh,
know, what the heck is that, right?
mhm.
um and we go like, no, there's no Caribbean Netherlands. The adjective describing the Netherlands is Caribbean. Caribbean is Caribbean.
Right,
Netherlands is Netherlands. But what
right,
they try to do is name these islands like Statia and Bonaire and Saba Caribbean Netherlands, and that's,
right.
again, something that we fight against. How you mean it doesn't matter? It does matter, because
Mhm.
one is a description of a thing, and the other thing says this is what the identity looks like, and we're telling you that we're Caribbean people. We're not. This is not the Netherlands. Netherlands is in Europe.
Right. And I think that's
Yeah.
important because that's how come many times, even when I'm making reference to our neighboring isle here of the quote British Virgin Islands, we just say Virgin Islands and we tend to
Yeah,
say United Virgin Islands. And then people get a little bit, what do you mean United Virgin Islands? They're different. I'm like, pause.
they're
Almost all
Virgin.
of our bloodline, family line, cross over
Mm-hmm.
that little piece of water between Tortola and St. John and St.
So
Thomas,
Queen.
Tortola. And so, I mean, even though there's a bazillion different little Virgin Islands in between, we tend to
Mm-hmm.
just say Virgin Islands. And then you have to figure out which one. Is
Yeah.
it Anegada, Jules Van Dyke, Virgin Gorda, Tortola, Wata
Mm-hmm.
Island, St. John, St. Croix,
Mm-hmm.
Thomas, so whichever islands, yeah. And then we know that
Mm-hmm.
there was a time that they would try to speak of even Puerto Rico and Culebra and Vieques as the Spanish Virgin Islands.
Wow.
And
Even.
I'm just saying, so we really are moving
Yeah.
in 2025, through these
Mm-hmm.
types of, whether it's CARIFESTA, whether it's through the
Mm-hmm.
CARICOM, whether it's through CARICOM Reparations Commission, whether it's through Caribbean Pan African Network, One SXM. And I'm saying all these names so people know that there are formations that are more than just us. They're wide
Right.
entities, whether it's through the Universal Negro Improvement Association, African Communities League, RC
Mm-hmm.
2020, or any formation of the UNIA, because there are many across the globe. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
important for person to, whether it's the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. We can sit here, the Afro Descendants Tribal Council in Costa Rica, right? Whether it's through the Sixth Region Diaspora Caucus, there's like so many formations, and I'm not naming all. I'm just saying the ones that keep resonating. This Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago that is consistently doing things around these types of discussions. I just think it's amazing that we're going to be able to have this
Yeah.
conversation forthcoming. And of course, the African Union and CARICOM gathering that's going to be happening in Addis Ababa in the beginning of September, and that there are representatives from our Caribbean spaces that are going to be participatory as well. And even if it's not those of us in our immediate circle, there are going to be persons that are going to be going with content input
Yeah.
from those of us in the wider circle. So we're always encouraging persons to email, and we'll give some of that shortly because we have a few more minutes. So I'd like to leave the
No,
rest.
Doc, you made a good point. Yesterday, 2 days ago, I was shopping, minding my business, and there is a local guy, musician, leader of a band. He walks up to me. He said, "You know what? I'm an anesthesiologist, right? That's what he does professionally. And he says, all my life I've concentrated on music and anesthesiology, right? That's what I do, right? He said, but now that I'm in this age, he's about our age, he's a little older than I am, a year or two. And he said, now that I'm in this age, I'm reading a lot more, but I'm paying attention to what's happening with Africa and the Caribbean. And I want to encourage you guys to keep doing the work that you do, etc. And the reason I brought this up, because I went to school with this young man, he went to the Netherlands, did his studies, and again, we meet on the party floor, we dance. He has an
Right.
awesome band, etc.
Right.
But the fact that in his 60s now, he's saying to me, I'm reading more, I'm understanding more of Africa, I'm seeing more. He came back at some point and talked to me about, we should talk about food that we eat, whether we're importing it from the right places, should we get a direct link to Africa, what can we do, how can we change the quality of the food that we're bringing in. So there's all of this, and I'm so grateful that what you just raised, like, it may not be you and I individually, personally, but more of our people are starting to see and to appreciate the work, the engagement, the connection. And it's for lack of exposure, lack of access, lack of knowledge, etc. But you're seeing that once it's available, or they become a lot more aware of what else is there other than the colonial narrative, then they're more inclined to say, okay, this doesn't look like right. This is the better fit for me. So
Exactly.
hearing you say that, I'm thinking that's exactly what it's about when we do this work.
Exactly. So that's why we're excited about what's coming forward in these next iterations, these next few ways, days, months, etc. And we encourage persons, I please give the call letters for persons to listen to your broadcast that's done by 1SXM on SOS Radio in St. Martin, please.
Okay, we have on two, well, there are three programs that are linked to each other, but they're all part of the same work. But one SXM's actual program is on my 88.3 FM, and that's on Saturdays from 5 to 7 p.m. every Saturday. And then we partner with, like you mentioned, SOS Radio, and in particular Culture Conscious Lyrics
Hmm.
Foundation, which is hosted by Suja Ref on SOS Radio. And he does a program on Saturday at 12 on SOS Radio, which is 99.5 FM. And then he does something, I can't remember the name of the exact program, on Monday at 6 p.m. on the same radio station. And then the one that Fabian and I do on Sundays from 1 to 2 p.m. on 102.7 FM, which is PJD2 Radio. And the name of the program is
102, you
called
said 102 or 107?
102.7
Thank
FM,
you. Okay.
and it's called Culture Time. And it literally does talk only about culture, things about culture and how these things relate, to culture. And that's from 1 to 2 on Sundays. So what
And
we
is
do
there
is
an
we
email
try to,
that I can
yeah,
put in
sorry.
here? Is there an email I can put in the chat for people that wanted to get more information on this?
You could use my email, because then if they do that, I could spread them out to the exact ones, because I can't remember Suja's email
Okay, no
directly at the
problem.
moment.
No problem. I just
Yeah,
wanted to know that we had that. Thank you. I mean, and I am grateful
yes,
because sometimes we do not have all of the time and platforms in this space to get that
yeah,
information. So I will put that in there just so persons can know um, to reach out. You can also contact AST Speaks so that I don't
right.
email out to everybody right this second. I'll just say you can contact, link with AST Speaks and we will get you
Yeah.
the information, and that way you can keep you won't have to go through another 10,000 emails.
Yes,
Right. We're
ma'am.
very grateful. So thank you. I mean, again, you see how fast that time went?
I can't believe it. I'm like, is it really?
Yeah. And that was with us just having, just an opportunity to share. I know that there's some things you can straighten out inside of the YouTube page where this is posted, but I want to thank you again, Sister Queen,
Thank you, though.
illustrious grandmother, Dr.
Thank you.
Rhoda Arundel of 1SXM, as well as a representative of the CRC coming through the CARICOM Reparations Commission and other organizations for just your representation, your candidness with sharing some updates on what's taking place in our beloved sister island of St. Martin, home of some of my grandparents. I want to make sure I say my
I
plug
know, right? Make
right.
sure.
Both Isle of St. Martin, right, and definitely sharing on behalf of the CARICOM initiatives that are coming forward, really making sure that we can show that support. And for all of the scholars, artivists that are going to be participatory in CARIFESTA 15 in Barbados from August 22nd through the 31st. And even in between, there's a lot of things happening in pre meetings and pre convenings and pre celebrations, as well as post activities. And just we encourage persons to keep tuning in here on AST Speaks, Building a New
Hmm.
Legacy. When we get an opportunity, we will be resuming our regular first and third Thursday at 8 p.m. starting September. And so we're just encouraging persons to just keep an ear to the ground, keep your eyes, keep moving high, keep your crown solid, and just remember that culture heals humanity, land is our foundation, and spiritual harmony unifies us. So we encourage you to keep supporting us Speaks. If you need more information, you can email us at astspeaks at gmail.com, or just look for Us Speaks inside of YouTube, as well as Facebook, as well as Instagram, or just put your information in the chat here on DaCrew Podcast. Make sure you subscribe, because that way, by
Hmm.
subscribing with DaCrew Podcast, you'll be able to see a wide array of broadcasts that are being done by some powerful, powerful communicators, broadcasters, podcasters, and much more. So we thank you again and again and again. And all I would close with would be to say, Hotep, and just stay free and be safe. And if you have whirlwinds in the area, just remember Marcus Garvey said, look
Yes.
for me in the whirlwind.
Hmm.
Woo! And we just
Yes,
know
ma'am.
that one God, one aim, one destiny, because our victory is certain. Have a
Yes.
blessed evening. Many blessings.
Ashe. Have a
Ashe.
good one to
You as
you and
well.
your audience. See you
Yeah.
soon, Doc.
See you soon. Blessings.
Blessings. Bye, Dr. Angela.